Chapter 9. Chapter 9 starts on page 170. So we're on page 170. General knowledge of contract law, or contracts. Requirements for a valid contract. You must have competent parties, mutual assent, legality of object. They may call that the covenant of Sason. Consideration, a legal description of the property, and a written, signed, and delivered contract. Let's move on to some definitions. Assignment, that's the transfer in writing of a mortgage. Novation, that's the substitution of an old party with the new party in a mortgage. I like to use this N, new. New person on the mortgage is the way I remember that. Contract clauses. We have contingencies and subject to. What this means, contingencies are subject to clauses. It's something has to happen before the contract can move forward. It's statements that will say things like, I will buy your house if I can sell my house. If the inspection is acceptable, I will purchase your home. Or if I can get financed, I will buy your home. There's a question on the exam that's going to ask you how to avoid a lengthy transaction when you have contingencies in the contract. And the answer is going to be the agent will put a time frame for the contingencies on the contract. So it will say something like, I will buy your house if I can sell my house. And then the seller will say, okay, but I'll give you 3 weeks. So that's how you would make it not so long. Okay, let's talk about breach of contract. Breach. A remedy for breach of specific performance. That's a lawsuit. Most time you'll see those in real life is when the property is not delivered in the same condition as when there was a meeting of the minds. Okay, so basically once you have that meetings of the mind and you both buyer and seller have agreed to the terms of the contract, the seller cannot go around his house and start taking down real expensive chandeliers, and he can't start taking out expensive faucets and fixtures. Everything has to be in place when the property closes. You can't go out and dig up blueberry bushes or just don't do anything at that time. You can't remove your window boxes, dig up rose bushes, remove fixtures, unless you have some type of written agreement to do so with the buyer. If you do any of those, it's a breach of contract and you get sued for specific performance. General requirements. Again, this is on page 170. The contract must be in writing, state the exact commission. This is for your listing agreement. Include the listing price or range, have a legal description of the property, include the broker's name, and it must be acknowledged by the seller. Remember that the broker owns all the sub-agent's listings. When a sub-agent moves to another office, who keeps the listings? The original broker. He owns them. Listing agreements. You have 3 types of listing agreements, and then you have this, which could be on top of any of these. You have an exclusive right listing, exclusive listing, and open listing. Does any of this sound familiar? Anything starting to repeat itself? Sure, we've done these. What we're going to do is we're going to go over these and over these and over these until you know them inside out. Okay, so I like to say if it doesn't say right, then it's wrong for me. It's wrong for you. Okay, so this is a type that you really want to get on your listing. A net listing is a listing. It can be any of these 3, and it's going to say something like the seller would like $1 million, and the listing agent can keep anything above that. Here's your exclusive right. The agent gets paid no matter who procures the buyer. The term procures means the one who set it into motion. The one, because of that person's action, the deal is going forward. That's what that means. Exclusive listing. Now this is the one without the word right in it. The seller reserves the right to sell it. If the seller sells it, the agent has not earned a commission. So exclusive right, if it doesn't say right, then it's wrong for you. If you just get the exclusive listing without the right, you might not get paid. If the seller finds that ready, willing, and able buyer that meets the terms of the listing agreement, they're the procuring cause and you are not the procuring cause. Then you have the open listing. The seller hires any number of agents. Commission is paid to the agent who procures the buyer. On open listings, a lot of times, I know in my office when an agent would be prospecting, and if they see a for sale by owner sign, they might go up and knock on the door and ask for an open listing, just to make sure if they do bring somebody by, they'll get paid. So you use all of your listings. A broker will spend more advertising money on an exclusive right listing. Do you know why? Because he's going to get paid. There are 3 types of buyer agreements that mirror the 3 types of listing. And look, you have an exclusive right buyer agency, exclusive buyer agency, and your open buyer agency. Always, always, always present all offers. You cannot hold back an offer from a seller. They all need to be delivered as soon as possible. All right, so don't hold anything back. A deed is transferred. Oh, actually, an offer becomes binding when it has been delivered and accepted. And a deed transfers title when the buyer accepts the deed. The only person who signs the deed is the grantor. That's the seller, the or giver. Time is of the essence. That basically is a statement that's going to be in your contracts, which indicates that things must be punctual. So you must have punctual performance. Everything has to be on time. Leaseholds. You have 3 main types of leaseholds. You have tenancy for years, tenancy at will, and tenancy at sufferance. Tenancy for years. It's a fixed term tenancy. It has a definite beginning and a definite end. It does not have to be for a year. It can be for a week. It can be for a month. It can be for 5 days. It just has a definite beginning and a definite ending. Tenancy at will. They might call this a periodic tenancy. A leasehold interest from month to month, week to week, or year to year. Either party may terminate it at will. And then tenancy at sufferance. Give me that angry face. That's your landlord. Tenancy at sufferance. The tenant is a trespasser. They might call it a holdover tenancy. It means an eviction is coming. And basically the tenant is making the landlord suffer. That's how I remember. Tenancy at sufferance, you're making the landlord suffer. And this is what your landlord's going to look like. Here's your types of leases. Okay, let's move on. Graduated lease. A lease that gradually increases over time. Net lease. Tenant pays some of the landlord expenses. You might see signs that just say NNN on it. That means a triple net lease. Net lease doesn't have to be a triple net lease, but if you see one, that's what it means. And it would include taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance. Gross lease. The landlord pays some of the tenant's expenses. We actually have a complex that we have a gross lease on. When we were trying to rent on some of our townhomes in Gulfport, we were finding that the people moving in never had the deposit that we required. And when we found out why, it was costing them $200 to get the electric on, $250 to get the water on, another $100 to get the gas on. And so at that point, they couldn't pay a deposit to us. So what we did is we keep those now on for all of our tenants, and instead of charging a lower rent, we just raised the rent to offset those charges, but it also gives them the money to give us for a security deposit. Index lease. Rent can go up and down based on an economic index. Percentage lease. Rent is based on the percentage of total sales. I always think of Dillard's when I go in there. What they're doing is they're paying a monthly rent, like a fixed rent, and then they're also paying a certain percentage of their total sales. Lease with the obligation to purchase or lease with an option to purchase. This is basically a rent to own. This is a unilateral contract, uni meaning one. Only one person is forced into doing something. So in a rent-to-own, the renter is not forced into purchasing the property. He can walk away if he decides to. But if he does decide to purchase, the seller is forced into fulfilling the contract. So it's a unilateral contract. One person is forced into doing something. Here's your ground lease. It's a long-term rental. I always think about McDonald's. McDonald's will go rent for 20 years a corner lot, and they'll build their building on it, but the lease is really only on the land itself. Okay, actual eviction. This is when the landlord files for eviction. Then you have constructive eviction. This is when the property becomes so uninhabitable that the tenant and the family can no longer live there. That you're going to see that in a slumlord situation. The tenant at that point is allowed to move out, and they are not responsible for the remainder of their lease. Your first right of refusal. Some more definitions. First right of refusal is the right to decide not to purchase before anyone else is offered to purchase. You'll see that a lot when you see a contract where it will have a contingency saying, I will buy your house if I sell my house. But if somebody comes to you first before I sell my house, I have the first right of refusal to turn down that contract so that you can offer it to somebody else. So that's pretty common. Then you have the installment contract, contract for deed, or land contract. It's basically the renter is purchasing a property over a period of time. The seller still is going to own legal title here. Valid, voidable, void, and unenforceable. Let me break these down for you. Okay, valid contains all the elements of a valid contract. It has an offer and acceptance, intention of the parties, consideration. It is enforceable. Also, remember, a contract signed by a married minor is valid. A married minor is considered to be emancipated. Voidable may lack a basic element, but it could become void or valid. Here's your unmarried minor. There's a question that's going to talk about an unmarried minor who signed a contract when he was 17 years old, but it was on a commercial property and it took a couple years for everything to get in place for it to close. So at the closing table, he was 19 years old. They ask you, is this contract while you're at the closing table, is it valid, voidable, or void? Your answer is going to be, it's still voidable because he signed the original contract when he was 17 years old. Void lacks the basic element of a valid contract. It includes illegal activities like drug dealing contracts. So there is a question I've seen in the past about drug dealers who made a verbal agreement where one was going to take a speedboat and go down to Central America and bring back a whole bunch of cocaine to the guy in Florida. And then the guy in Florida decided not to pay him. And then they're going to ask, can the guy who drove his boat down to Central America sue the guy because he has a valid contract? And your answer is going to be no, because it's a void contract. Because it's illegal. Illegal activity is automatically voided. Unenforceable. It looks valid on the surface, but it's unenforceable. Let's talk about some more definitions that you're going to need in the real world as well. Retainer fee. It's money up front for a service. You'll have a lot of attorneys that will have a retainer fee so that you can call them anytime you want. Flat or fixed fee. This is a set fee. This is really interesting. I've seen not a lot of brokers, but several successful brokers who will charge just a flat fee for listing and selling your property. Instead of asking for a percentage of the sales price, they'll say, I will be charging you $5,000 no matter what we sell your house for. So that would be a set fee or a flat and fixed fee. And then percentage fee is the most common commission that is charged, where somebody will get a percentage as a commission on the sales price. Then you're going to need the definition. You need to know the definitions of amendment and addendum. Amend, doesn't that mean to change? Amend a contract. Addendum, look, the word add is right there. To add something to the contract. And we're going to end chapter 9.